G'day folks. Well, over the years we have filmed hundreds of incredibly talented people across the world. Many of these artists have gone on to produce their own videos as well. We hope you enjoy this great lesson from one of our Colour in Your Life artists.
Hello and welcome to Jules Sharman Art, part 2, where we're developing this acrylic painting that I've called Strength a little bit further. Part 1 was the ugly block-in phase, which I love doing. We're going to continue on from there to develop this a little bit further, okay? So we're going to carry on with the same colour palette. I'll go through the colours with you as we go. To start off with, I'm going to focus on that first small crashing wave and the foam, all right? So I'm going to pick up a really light murky green colour. Love this colour. It is actually titanium white, bit of cad yellow, burnt umber, phthalo blue. So I basically made a green tone first, added the burnt umber, and then a drop of raw sienna. So you'll see it's a really ugly, disgusting colour that I'm popping in now. But to be honest, I love it, okay? I never used to paint with this colour, but for me it actually brings out a lot of realism, especially in waves. You know, it gives it that impression that it represents sand that's really rolling and has a lot of movement in that wave that's about to crash. So for me, this is going to be representing the sand. So I'm just blocking it in so you can see where I'm heading with this painting at the moment. And in a minute, I will add a little bit more cad yellow to that tone, just to make it a little bit lighter and brighter even more. But before I do that, I'm just picking up a blending brush, and you'll see me just really gently just smooth out the top and bottom of what I've just mapped in there on the canvas, okay? When I popped that in, the brush was really wet and I had lots of really thick paint on it. And because acrylics dry quite quickly, next minute you know you've got lumps and bumps on your canvas. And personally, I like that really smooth effect at the end of a painting. So just make sure as you go that you do, you know, mop off basically all of those little lumps and bumps with the blending brush. So here's the lighter tone. So I'm just really highlighting now some more of that sand that you're going to see. You'll notice now when I'm blending, I'm just smoothing over the top aspect of that rather than the bottom as well, and you'll see why in a tick. We're going to pick up some burnt umber, just neat on the brush. The same brush that I used before. You know, I don't clean it properly, I just literally get a paper towel, wipe the colour off, dunk it in the burnt umber, and I'm now popping in a shadow, which is going to be, you know, the base. It's going to act as the base of that rolling wave, as well as the shadow for the foam that's going to be crashing on the foreshore. I also just added a nip of phthalo blue to that now, and I'm going over that same area, just in a thin glaze of that darker tone, just to really make that stand out now. And I must say, you might have to excuse my voice, I'm sorry. It might get a little bit croaky, hopefully not, but hopefully it'll hold out for me. Now on the brush now, I've picked up some burnt umber and titanium white. It is really, really light, okay, really mild. The burnt umber's a really strong colour, and I just wanted it, you know, practically just off-white. And I am actually now just mapping out where that foam is going to be located on that rolling wave. I've used the same brush now without cleaning it, and I've just popped it in some titanium white. Because I haven't cleaned the brush, you can see it's actually naturally making a mid-tone of that light sand colour and the titanium white, okay? So it automatically, when you don't clean the brush all the time, it really, you know, it helps create the mid-tone for you naturally as you're painting. So I've just picked up some more titanium white now, just to really, I'm, you know, pretty much just mapping it all out so you guys know where I'm heading with this painting at the moment. So just doing circular motions just to blend that in a little bit more, smooth it out again. Quite often when you're doing the foam and bits and bobs like this in a seascape, okay, instead of always picking up a dry blending brush, you can actually just wipe the paint off the brush that you're already using and do those circular motions that you just saw me do, And that is another technique that you can use just to blend the colours in a little bit better with each other. So again, just doing another little layer of white now, just neat titanium white, just to really, highlight where that foam's going to be. You've got to be really careful when you do, whether it's, a full big breaking wave or just a little crashing wave on the foreshore. When you do the white of the foam, you've got to be really careful that you don't want it too white, okay? Because in real life, a lot of it actually is in shadow more than bright, bright white. Now, I am using the titanium white, just blocking in roughly where I'm going to have the foam trails happening here, okay? So you can see it's all a little bit higgledy-piggledy. It's not, really solid, sharp lines here. So I'm just mapping out where I want them. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking of perspective as I go, all right? Obviously, I didn't just draw in a picture on the canvas and then colour it in. So as I'm doing this, you really do need to be conscious of where you want your focal point in the painting to be so that the perspective and the direction of where the foam is going to be rolling and sliding back into the water is actually all going to be directed towards your focal point. For me in this painting, I want the focal point to be that crashing wave that we've done, basically to the centre, to the left side of it a little bit. So you can see the foam trails I've got are kind of all directed towards that way. I have dipped the brush in titanium white now a little bit more, and you can see I'm making it a little bit more vivid and prominent where I'm having the foam trails, okay? In seascape painting, for me, to create the realism that I normally achieve, it is actually just done through multiple layers of building up tonal value, okay? Everyone knows that acrylic paints tend to dry a couple of tones darker. So the first couple of tones of this white, even though it's neat, tight white, on that block-in shade that we did, it's obviously going to dry a little bit darker. So you do need to go over a couple of times to build up that real brightness in it, in the areas that you know that the sun's going to be really smashing down and hitting on that foam where you want it to be white. Again, you have to be cautious because a lot of the foam is actually realistically in shade. It's very textured, it's uneven, the contour of it is very irregular. There's nothing consistent in oceans at all, okay? So where the reflections are, where the refractions of the light's going to be and where the shadows are, it can actually look all higgledy-piggledy, so you don't want too much white all over the place, okay? You've got to be quite specific where you want that. So you can see, the vividness and the brightness of the tight white that I'm using at the moment is basically closer to the drier sand area. Further back to that crashing wave, you can see it's not as bright because that is actually going to be in the shadow more from the actual wave that is rolling. Sometimes people can be a little bit reluctant or get a little bit twitchy when they start blocking in the foam and reflections in the water because, to get the perspective right is actually quite difficult. It takes a fair bit of time and practice. And to be honest, the very first time I put the foam in, it just looked like circles that are standing up perpendicular from the sand. They can look a little bit ridiculous. So it's about practice. It's about, trial and error, playing around. You'll have to do it a few times before you can get it right. This actually took me quite a few paintings to hammer through to be able to do the foam how I actually do. So obviously when you think of foam, the water is actually obviously going to be pushing the foam. It's either going to be running up towards the sand or it's going to be drifting back, being pulled back into the ocean direction. So that is the direction that you need to have the foam, okay? You've got to be really careful. You can do your squish diamonds and your little oval shapes and things like that. But again, think of your focal point and think of where they're actually going to be leading your eye to when you do them. Okay, I've changed tones there, so I'm now working with a little bit more ultramarine blue and white, which is the sky colour. And the reason for that is it's a little bit darker than the tone I was using before. And now that I'm working and doing the foam closer to that crashing wave, it is going to be in the shadow just a tad more. So again, really subtle differences with the tonal change there, but they are there. And it's the little things like that that in the end of a picture and painting make a massive difference. And just popping some little foam trails, you know, coming down that are coming down from the wave into the foreground area. You can see, you know, again, you need to actually kind of, you know, think that the wave is turning and crashing over to consider perspective as you go. Now, behind that first rolling wave, which we will come back to develop a little bit further as it dries more, right behind there, again, you know, I want heaps of sand, I want heaps of foam, I want it to look really, really, not so much choppy, but I want it to look, you know, there's heaps of movement happening there. There's going to be lots of surf here. In between, I'm going to have the first rolling wave, lots of foam and movement, and then another smaller wave that's just about to break behind there. So in between that, I'm now just blocking in the sand colour again. And again, you know, just any old brush, you don't want to apply it in, you know, really straight, neat lines. You want a regularity here. Now on that same brush, without cleaning it, I've just dunked it in some titanium white, and this is now, you know, the base of lots of foam that's going to be happening in that area. So again, with the brush, you know, it's really important to use different techniques with that brush. You know, I haven't changed brush at all actually since I started this painting. It's the same one. But you've got to use it differently, okay? You can press hard on it in some areas, soft in others. You can use the tip of it, the corner of it. You know, change the angles around with how you apply the paint to, you know, that actually helps build up that realistic effect of foam. And obviously I'm, you know, pressing on the brush here a little bit harder because I want that left area to have lots more foam there. I've picked up the, you know, kind of like the deep ocean colour here now. And that was the phthalo blue. And I have got a little bit of burnt umber mixed with that actually, to be honest with you. And I'm now just adding in some shadows to that foam. You can see it makes it look quite unrealistic at the moment, okay? And again, you know, don't be deterred by that because we're still going to be, I'm going to come back over this after and add some more foam. So that will actually help tone down those shadows and just blend them into the foam a little bit better. Now I've changed to a round brush. Up until now I've been using a flat brush, and I'm using a dry technique now for this, okay? So I've just popped it in some titanium white, and I'm really wanting to highlight the top of the foam of that first wave. And you can see it starts off quite bright, but the paint underneath it is still a little bit wet. So you'll see it will actually, you know, again, I'll be creating a mid-tone naturally by pressing some of that white firmer into that base colour. It's really easy when you do rolling waves to start, you know, basically just moving your hand in a pattern and doing regular movements, okay? So, you know, the foam ends up looking really neat and tidy. For me, I quite often get complimented on my paintings, especially my beach ones, because they do look realistic, okay? You've got to actually stop and think sometimes, you know, are you getting yourself into a pattern that is going to take that realism away, okay? Because in reality, if you're standing on a beach and you see the waves crashing, there's nothing, consistent and regular about them at all. You've just got like masses of water and foam splattered everywhere, really. So that's really what you want to represent when you're doing this. So make sure that, again, you roll your brush in different directions, up and down, using the different techniques that you can. And that applies, again, I'm adding more foam here. I'm using a smaller, finer brush now because I'm really starting to try and define the shape of that foam and the foam trails. Some of the foam where I've just popped in there where it's quite thick, can be from another wave crashing. And then other bits are going to be really fine little foam trails in between the waves. Okay, this is where it's quite important. Again, you've always got to really constantly think of perspective here, okay? I've done that crashing wave, I've done a fair bit of foam in between it. So now I'm doing some trails back out to, more distant ocean. And there is going to be another wave there eventually, just another really small wave, okay? So again, these foam trails, you can see I'm kind of having them directed off towards the left a little bit more, rather than just going straight back towards the distant ocean and the horizon, okay? There's always swell, there's movement. I really want this to look choppy and real, okay? So they're going to be in different directions, but you don't want them to just look like, straight lines so that they're perpendicular to the water. They do have to kind of be, really shaped properly. And again, it's just practice. You can't be expected to do it the first time and get it right. But the good thing about acrylic is that if you do something, if you pop a line in or a bit of foam, you think, oh gosh, that looks really, really off and not really okay. It doesn't matter, you can either just wipe it off, wait for it to dry and go over it. There's no such things as mistakes as far as I'm concerned when you paint. It's all about just assessing, seeing if the composition and perspective's right, and then adjusting if you need. So I've just popped some shadows in now on that foam, and you can see I'm just kind of blending it in. Now just coming back over and doing a few little touch-ups to highlight a little bit more. There's lots of different techniques of how to paint and styles of painting. And again, there's no right and wrong way, all right? Some people, when they do their waves, they prefer to just literally block in the darker colours first, wait for it to dry, and then, keep coming over with your lighter colours. I tend to go from dark to light, because for me, I just find that works really well. And I think it is the build-up of those different tonal layers that do actually help with perspective and getting that real effect happening. Now you can see there is a little bit of a difference of tone here, okay? So this is ultramarine blue and the titanium white, which is the same sky colour now. So I'm going to use this for the water reflections, literally from here to the distant ocean towards the horizon. Eventually we will actually come back and add a different tone closer to the shore. But for now we will just be using this colour, okay? And again you can see closer to the waves, the reflections and the foam trails are a little bit wider, they're a little bit thicker and longer, okay? As you go back into the distant ocean, you want them to be really thin and fine. You can still have a few in the distant ocean, quite long and going across the whole canvas. but you don't really want too many of them going completely all the way across. You want more tiny little ones. You know, it helps build up the illusion that it's further away because they're really tiny and really thin compared to the ones that are closer. This stage for me is actually quite important, okay? I think a lot of people underestimate, when you're doing the distant ocean, because the tonal value I've got there is really similar to the colour of the ocean, okay? A lot of people just think, oh, that's just a waste of time, you don't really need to do that. Personally, I think you do, okay? You can see, you know, there's not stark differences there. It's not a standout reflection or reflective area. But again, it's just what happens when you create, when you keep going over, okay? So I will wait for that to dry, and then literally I will go back again and do another layer. Not necessarily on top of what I've just done, but I will change the tone just really slightly and do some more reflections in between what I've already done there. And it's, you know, sometimes it's a second and third layer of reflections that really give it, like, you know, that big zang that, you know, makes you look like you're looking at the ocean rather than just, you know, something flat. I should probably also let you guys know now, this tutorial that I'm doing at the moment, obviously this painting is not going to be entirely finished at the end of this video. You can see me now, I've just picked up that deeper ocean colour again, and I'm now just going back to highlight some of the troughs and the shadows and the darker tones to really give it that effect that there's movement happening in the water there. But this painting, you know, after this video, I carried on painting for, you know, several more hours after, just developing again, you know, refining the troughs and the reflections and the peaks in the distant ocean and the foam in the foreground. You know, I need to come back and there will be shadowing added to that, okay? So again, apologies, but this painting can't be finished just in this video because it took me several hours to do. But, you know, you get the idea of the techniques that I use and the stages that I go through. So when you come back with the darks like this, you just want them really sparingly, okay? You don't want to do them too much again. You don't want to do them all over the shop. Otherwise, it takes the effect away of the reflections you've just popped in. Sometimes less is better.